before we get into anything else, I just need to give a scheduling update, which is that Toby and I, please God, are leaving for Israel next Monday,
Ooh, wow.
and we will be not here for the following 2 Tuesdays.
Oh my.
And it looks like I won't be available the third Tuesday after that either. I have to
What are the
travel.
actual dates?
Now you want dates, huh?
Well, let's see. What's today? Tuesday. Okay, that's a good start.
The
Traveling on the
28th,
27th. Okay.
right?
The
The
4th.
28th, the 4th, and the 11th.
Okay.
So for the week of the 11th, I could potentially do a different night, um, but I will not be available on the 28th or the 4th.
Okay.
So, okay. All right. That being said, let's get into tonight's topic, which is really not the Parsha at all. The Parsha this week is Vayetchanan. It's Shabbos Nachamu. It did not feel right talking about Shabbos Nachamu before we went through Tisha B'av. I wanted to share. I hope it's gonna be effective. I I got a really wonderful book, um, The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic, Rereading the Women of the Talmud. If you can see it, Gila Fine. She was actually a scholar in residence in Beth Tefillah earlier this year, and we got to have a Shabbos meal with her.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. She takes kind of like the paradigms. I think there's a method in literary criticism, which I don't know exactly what it's
Just
called, but she
literary analysis type of stuff that she does,
no, but
right?
she
Like,
takes like a paradigm of women
yeah,
characters, right? So she has a chapter on the shrew, the femme fatale, the prima madonna, the Madonna whore, the overachieverix, um, the angel in the house, whatever. And she like kind of sets up the literary history of what the character type is supposed to be, and then looks at characters in the Talmud to see if they fit the mold or don't fit the mold. Spoiler alert, they never fit the mold. Um, but it's yeah, it won a number of awards, and she has a chapter that relates to the Gemara, which is the source, the main text that's studied in the context of Tisha B'av. So I thought it was worthwhile to look at it. It's based on a very lengthy Gemara passage, and so obviously it would be best if we had time to go through the entire Gemara properly, but we don't have that time in our hour. I suspect that for some of us, at least the main points of some of these passages may be familiar. And so we're going to do what I hate to do, but kind of rush through to give just a sense and a taste of what we're dealing with. And then we're going to zoom in on, as the title of this year says, on the character of Marta. Okay, so that's what we're going to do tonight. Again, I hope that this I don't know what's going to be, so we'll see. Okay, so the story we begin with the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, right? That is the story of Tisha B'av. The Gemara tells us, a Kamsa ubar Kamsa chayav Yerushalayim. Because of the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed. What is the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa? So there is a man, a very wealthy man, living in Jerusalem during the time of the first temple, and he is great friends with Kamsa and great enemies with Bar Kamsa. And he's having a party, and he tells his servants to invite Kamsa to come to the party. And the servant is going on his route, delivering all the invitations, and he sees a door marked Bar Kamsa. So that's close enough to what my master told me. Must be right. He didn't want to write, he forgot to write bar beforehand, or he did, he wasn't holding in first initials, whatever. So he gives the invitation to Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa comes to the party. The host sees him there, gets very upset, tells him to leave. Bar Kamsa doesn't want to be embarrassed. He says, "Please let me stay. I'll pay for my meal." The host says, "Absolutely not. Get out of here." He says, "I'll pay for the half the bill of the entire party." And the host still says no. He says, "I'll pay for the entire party. Just don't embarrass me." And the host still says no. And so Bar Kamsa is forced to leave in embarrassment. We're going to pick up now here the second paragraph in the English. And it's so Bar Kamsa resolves, since, right, he says, since the rabbis were in attendance at this party and they didn't protest, right, it must be that they agreed with how this host acted and treated me. And so I'm going to show them, I'm going to get them. And what does he do? He goes to the Roman emperor and he says, the Jews are rebelling against you. The emperor says, what are you talking about? He says, I'll prove it to you. Send a sacrifice to the Beis Hamikdash and see if they accept it or not. And so the emperor prepares a beautiful animal to be offered as a sacrifice. And as Bar Kamsa is leading the animal to the Beis Hamikdash, he puts a little nick, either right in its lip or in its eyeball, something which, according to the Roman tradition, is not considered a mum, is not considered a blemish, but according to the rabbinic tradition, was considered a blemish, which would invalidate the animal for sacrifice.
I think, can you zoom in a bit?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to hit the zoom. Sorry.
One more. There you
There
go.
All right, 192, that's the magic number. Okay, so the rabbis see this animal, which has a blemish according to the rabbis, and they say, normally we wouldn't accept this, but A, it's a machlokas, and B, we know this is coming from the emperor, and we have to be sure to maintain shalom malchus, to maintain peace with the governing authorities. Let's offer this animal, despite the fact that it has this potential blemish. And one rabbi speaks up. Amar Lahu Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas, Yomru Bale Mumin craving Lagabe Mizbeach. If we accept the sacrifice of the Roman emperor, we're going to have to accept all sacrifices that have blemishes on it, and that's going to be a disgrace to Torah and Halacha. So now the rabbis are in a quandary, because really Zachariah is correct, right? His logic is sound. And so they say, oh, well, the only other option we have is we have to kill Bar Kamsa. Now, normally, right? So he's a Moe. He is a rebel. He is someone who does deserve to be punished. He's a Rodef. He's not a good guy. And that's the only way that they will save, that the word won't get back to the emperor that his sacrifice was rejected. And again, Rabbi Zachariah speaks up. Amulahu Rabbi Zachariah, Yamu Meitil Mum B'Kadshim Yeharei. So they'll say, well, if we kill him, then people may conclude from this that anyone who inflicts a blemish on an animal is going to be killed. That also is not what halacha says. And so they're in a quandary. They can't do anything, right? And presumably this leads to the siege on Jerusalem, which leads to its destruction. This part of the story concludes, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, An vunatos Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas, Hechariv et Beitenu, Sarfat Echalenu, V'higlatanu me'artenu. The modesty of, the humility of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas destroyed our temple, burned our sanctuary, and exiled us from our land. Okay, that's the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And most people, when they study this in the context of Tisha B'Av, it ends here, or they give 3 dots, and they go to what I labeled as part number 5, which is the story of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? So again, I think we've studied this story together, right? That he, you know, he's in the siege city of Jerusalem. He finds a way to sneak himself out. He pretends to be dead. They carry him out. He goes to Vespasian, who was the general in charge, and he says, "Shalom Aleichem Malki," right? He greets him as king, and the Vespasian says, "I should have you killed twice. Number one, you escaped the siege. You left the city when you weren't supposed to. Number two, what are you doing calling me king? I'm not the king. I'm the general." And so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, "No, I see that you are going to be named king." And in the course of their conversation, a delegation comes from Rome saying, "The emperor just died, and they want you to take his place." And so Vespasian says, "Okay, you should know that someone else is going to finish the job here. Someone else is going to destroy Yerushalayim. But since you gave me such good news, I'm going to grant you a wish, as it were." And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he gets a little selfish. He doesn't just, but the famous thing he asks for is Tinli Yavne v'chachmata. Give me the city of Yavna and its sages, right? And so he's generally seen as the man who saved Judaism at this point, right? He realizes that the Beis Hamikdash, Yerushalayim are going to be destroyed, even though he could have asked for some respite, for some relief. It was a lost cause, so he makes the calculation to continue the rabbinic authority in Yavne, where there was a small yeshiva in place, and he's granted that. All right, the Gemara itself criticizes him. We'll see that in a couple of minutes, right? They question, was this the right thing? Shouldn't he have asked for something better? And it's not so clear what the right answer is, but they say in his mind, this was the best thing to ask for, right? And so these are the two stories that kind of bookended, and I suspect, I hope, are familiar to many of us, right? And these are often studied in the course of Tisha B'Av. We tend to skip over the middle sections, right? So I'm going to really just glance over the section of Nero. This is a really interesting section. I have no idea what to make of it, but we can come back to it maybe next year, right? So it says that after Zachariah, right? So we're back to just after the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa with Zachariah ben Avkulas. So then we're told that Nero was sent as the general to lay siege to the city. He figures out that Jerusalem is going to fall, but that he's, whoever destroys Jerusalem is going to ultimately be punished. He says he doesn't want anything to do with that, so he goes and converts. He becomes Jewish. And we're told that Rabbi Meir was a descendant from Nero. Fascinating. I have no idea what to make of this. And so we're just going to skip over it. But I couldn't not share that juicy story, that Rabbi Meir, right, one of the great rabbis of the Mishnah of the rabbinic period, was a descendant of Nero, because Nero didn't want to suffer the consequences of being the one who destroyed Jerusalem. Okay, so now we come to the siege of Jerusalem. And again, we're not going to give this the proper attention it deserves, but we're told that Vespasian was sent to lay siege after Nero defected, as it were, and so he lays siege to the city for 3 years. And the Gemara tells us, Havu bahanu talta atire. There were 3 very, very rich men living in the city. Nakdimon ben Gurion, ben Kalba Savua, ben Tzitzit HaKeset. Right, and it gives us their names: Nakdimon ben Gurion, ben Kalba Savua, and ben Tzitzit HaKeset. And so it goes through how wealthy each one of them were, and that between the 3 of them, they could have sustained the city for 21 years. Between the food and the wood and whatever other supplies and storehouses they had, they could have sustained the city for 21 years. But we know that didn't happen. What happened instead? So the rabbis right? So we know that there was the group of rabbis and there was the group of zealots, of extremists. And so the rabbis say that they want to go and offer peace to the Romans and try to come to some good conclusion to this siege, and the zealots reject that. Um, the zealots do not allow them to do this, and so the zealots say we want to go in battle. We want to go fight them. That's what zealots do, is they fight. And the rabbis say we're not going to win. That's a stupid thing to do. And so what do the zealots do? They burn the storehouses of these rich men, and they force, as you know, they leave no option, because now there's no food, there's no supplies, and so the only choice the Jews have is either to surrender or to fight. And so the zealots kind of win the day, they win the argument, but in a very backhanded way, in a very unproductive way. And then we come to the story of Marta. Okay, um, so the zealots burn down the storehouses, and there's a famine in the city. This is at least 3 years into the siege. And then we're told, Marta bat Baitus atirta de Yerushalayim havia. Marta bat Baitus was one of the wealthy women of Jerusalem. Shadarte l'shluche va'amar le zil aiti li smida. So she calls her servant, and she says, go buy for me fine flour. Ada'azio izdaban. By the time he made it to the shuk, to the market, it was all sold out. Remember, there's a famine. There's very limited supplies. Ata amarle smida leka. Chivarta ika. So he comes back. He says there is no more fine flour, but there is white flour. Amarle zio itili. So he says, okay, go buy me some of that white flour. Ada'azio izdaban. Again, it was sold out by the time he got to the market. Atava amarla chivarta leka gushrika ika. So he comes back and he says to her, there is no more white flour, but there is coarse flour. Gushkara. Amarle ziolaitili. She says, okay, so go get me some of the coarse flour. Da'azil isaban. By the time he got to the market, it was already sold out. Atavi amarla gushka kataleka kimcha desa'ari ika. So he comes back for the fourth time and he tells her there is no more coarse flour, but there is barley flour. Amarle zil izdaban. Zil itili. Da'azil izdaban. So again, she says, okay, go buy that. By the time he gets to the store, that's also sold out. Hava shlifa misana. So, right, she had just removed her shoes. Amra ipuk va'achaze I mishkachana mide lemecho. And she says, since my servant is of no use to me, I'm going to go and see if I can find anything to eat. Itiv la parta bechra'a. She stepped in a pile of dung, which stuck to her foot. Umita, and she became so repulsed by what just happened that she died. Kari Ali Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Right, so the hero from the next chapter in this lengthy story, whose story we already told. Haraka becha vaguna asher lo nistana kaf raglata. So he reads to her about her the verse from Devarim, the tender and delicate woman among you who would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground, right? Because she stepped with her bare foot into the pile of dung. Ika de Amri Gurgoret de Rabbi Tzadok Achla. There are some who say that it wasn't that she stepped in a pile of dung, but that she ate the fig of Rabbi Tzadok. Eats Nisa Umita, and that's what caused her to die. Because it was so disgusting. What's the fig of Rabbi Tzadok? The Rabbi Tzadok yativ arba'in shanin betanita d'lo lechariv Yerushalayim. Because Rabbi Tzadok sat in fast for 40 years that Jerusalem shouldn't be destroyed. Ki hava achil midi hava mitchaze me'abare. And whenever he would eat something, he was so emaciated that you could see the food passing along his digestive tract. V'chihava bare maitele gargurit ma'itz maihu v'shadelu. And when he would, when what only thing he could eat is they would bring him a fig, and he would suck the juices of the fig, but he wouldn't swallow it. And right, so this he would throw away the actual fruit, and this is the fruit. This is what Marta found, and she died. Ki nicha nafsha apikta lechol dahava v'chaspa shadete b'shuka. So as Marta was dying, either because of having stepped in the pile of dung or having eaten the already chewed on fig of Rebbe Tzadok, she took her silver and gold and threw it out in the streets. Amra hai lamai mi baile. She says, why do I need all this? V'hainu dichtiv kaspam bechutzot yashlichu. And so this is the pasuk in Yecheskel. They cast their silver in the streets. That's the story of Marta. Okay, and that's really our focus for tonight. So I'm going to pause. Are there any initial questions or reactions to the story of Marta? Is Marta a positive character or a negative character here?
Didn't realize I was muted.
You have to scroll down some.
It seems strange that the fellow wouldn't have purchased something and brought it back right away if they're really starving.
Yeah.
I don't.
So
it doesn't make sense to me.
So why is the servant, so paralyzed? He has to go back to her and report exactly what's there and what's not there. He should just buy whatever flour is available and bring it back to her.
That's a cool theme with Yochanan ben Zakkai too, right?
Hmm?
It's the same theme in Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Why he asks for Yavneh and Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Tzadok is, and he gets criticized in the Gemara for it, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is, like, he knew that if he asked for him not to burn the Beit HaMikdash, that wouldn't have been possible. So he took what he could get, right?
Yeah.
And this is also this is sort of the inverse of that. Like, what happened to people like this? This servant doesn't know if he's allowed to just take what he could get. And because of that failure to do so, she dies.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to come back to that connection and that kind of message.
To sum it, it's
right.
not
So
even
so clearly,
it's not a story
right?
about her, right? It's a story about her servant.
So that's a question. Is it a story about her, a story about her servant? That's one interesting question. So the chapter, right? Remember I told you how each chapter in this book is titled after sort of a paradigm of female characters in literature. So this chapter is called the prima donna. Marta is the prima donna. So is the prima donna generally a positive character or a negative character?
Negative.
Oh boy, usually a negative character.
Usually a negative character, right? So so Marta seems to fit that mold pretty well, right? She's totally out of touch with reality around her. She doesn't understand that there's no food available. She thinks that she can get fine flour whenever she wants it. Amazon Prime, deliver in 2 hours. Right? That's what she thinks is going to happen. She has no idea what's going on. She has this very rigid, presumably the servant is terrified. If he doesn't do exactly what the master says, he's going to get in trouble. So that's why he comes back 4 times and tells her they don't have this, but they do have that. So that's our encounter with Marta. Any other questions or thoughts at this point on this passage?
Well, when it comes to stories from people who are starving, I'd say to myself, well, probably just don't understand their situation well enough to say anything. It's, horrible, horrible thing. So, but it seems like it's rather unusual, nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll come back, and as we said, in Gila Fine's analysis, none of the characters really fit with the literary paradigm. So Marta also is not going to necessarily fit, although she says Marta is a hard figure to find any redeeming qualities with. And I mean, I didn't bring it. There's other sources which make her even more problematic. She kind of in a backwards, corrupt kind of way married the Kohen Gadol. She was not such an upstanding citizen, as it were. Okay, so we already gave an overview of of Rabbi Yochanan. So I'm not going to review that again right now. We're going to fast forward, right? So the first thing that I just wanted to note is Gila Fine mentions, right, that again, this passage or these couple pages of Gemara are cited so frequently in the context of Tisha B'Av, in the context of Rabbi Yochanan being the hero, the man who saved Judaism, the man who enabled Judaism to continue to flourish, right? So within the countless studies, think pieces, and classes on the destruction story cycle, the legend of Marta is more often than not ignored. Although this, I don't know what that shouldn't be came. Although this stands at the very heart of the cycle, and I submit serves as its critical turning point. Right, this is actually the key to understanding the whole passage, the whole story, right? And as you would expect from someone who's sort of into literary analysis, Gila Fine is very adamant that it is a huge mistake to stop, on Tisha B'Av, to stop the study of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa after the critique of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas. That if you don't look at the passage in its entirety, all two dapim of it, then you're missing the point. So that being said,
Sorry, what's the point?
It's the critical turning point in the narrative, in this destruction narrative, in this passage, big passage describing the destruction of Yerushalayim.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So we already mentioned sort of the absurdity of the servant having to go back and forth so many times to ask, to report back what's in the store, what's not in the store, and to get permission to buy the next thing, right? So she says on this, in returning to ask for Marta's permission each time, the servant displays the same kind of purism, the same fear of getting it wrong, the same humility as the rabbis. The implication of this parallelism are radical. If the servant, in his fear of deviating from his mistress's orders, ends up causing her death, then the rabbis, in their fear of deviating from their master's orders, end up destroying him. Right? So, right, it's Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas who's criticized in our Kamsa Bar Kamsa story, but really he is reflective of the attitude of the rabbinic leadership. Right? We have one rabbi, it was Rabbi Yochanan, right, who criticized him and says, it was his humility that, and whether humility is the proper translation of anvunato in this case is an interesting question.
I was
But it
looking
was,
that up. Yeah, I was wondering if it was
but
bittul. It's not bittul.
yeah, right. But whether it was his humility, but really that was the attitude that all the rabbis had. They all agreed with him. Right. The Gemara tells us that what upset Bar Kamsa was that the rabbis were present and didn't stop the host from embarrassing Bar Kamsa, right? That
Mhm.
this was the attitude that the rabbis had, right? We could in kind of in our day and age maybe think of it as a literalism, a fundamentalism, right? A lack of, and any, but this things have to be done exactly according to the book without any consideration of broader circumstances or context, is a critique that continues, I think, to this day. And so the servant, right, that is the dynamic that Marta established with her servant. Yes, the servant maybe, you know, should have acted on his own at some point and just bought whatever flour could be bought, but clearly that was the attitude, that was the where what he was coming from.
There's, if I can add something, you've mentioned Rav Lichtenstein, Rav Soloveitchik's son-in-law,
Hmm.
a number of times. He was an interesting person.
He was
I
a
had
fascinating person,
I
yes.
had the opportunity to hear him lecture at YU. There were at least 700 of the students who were there and some faculty and so on. And I happened to be in
Oh,
the building and I sat in. And I have to admit, I didn't understand the vast majority of what he said.
Was that because
Um,
you couldn't
uh,
audibly understand him because he was known to mumble everything,
there was a
or
PA
because he was,
system. The
uh-huh,
words, the word, the words were audible, but
okay,
I wasn't tuned in
yeah,
to what he was saying. But one of the stories that I do recall that he did not mention, but is told about him, is his routine on Motzai Shabbat,
hmm,
Naisufrit, the after Yantif as well, that you could find him in his kitchen washing the dishes,
yeah,
having taken off his suit coat, put it away, with a towel or an apron on him, and he could be found there reliably. So if there was an urgent need, that's where he was, because he was a realist
yeah,
that he needed to do something that was fundamental that not everybody would take care of. Um, this is a man whose was it his smicha, was his smicha, and his PhD was from that minor institution of Harvard in advanced literature. And
he spoke the truth.
the question is whether one sees what is real
yeah,
and one understands what is uh, fundamentally important and real. In Holocaust literature, from Lodz Ghetto, Warsaw Ghetto, there are some descriptions of awful experiences, awful behaviors, and occasionally people who do things which are minor and um, they're they're shocking in that people could still feel the need to try to be kind
yeah,
within the limits of what their own mood, attitude, physical condition, fears would permit. That and this a siege of as many years as it was would also contribute to that breakdown.
yeah, for
And
sure.
what would it be to try to rebuild? And so Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai's modest proposal to Vespasian is uh, he understood what was going on.
Yeah, and that right, and so that's the second point here is right,
Yeah.
is so if we have the introduction to Marta being the rigidity of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas and the other rabbis who weren't able to show flexibility when flexibility was needed. Right? On the flip side of it, we have Rabbi Yochanan, who, as we said, his modest request, right? Literally his anava, his modesty led to Judaism being able to survive and thrive. Right. So that's the first that's the first key that helps her to see Marta as being kind of the turning point of this entire story and episode. Um, the second, just Robert, you were talking so beautifully about Rabbi Lichtenstein. The story I always was told about Rabbi Lichtenstein was a Tisha B'Av story, which is that right, we make the joke, but that the fastest transformation from angels to animals happens on Motzei Yom Kippur after the shofar blasts, and we were at this high level of beautiful davening, and then everyone rushes to get whatever food is set up, and all we come down very fast, right? So the same could happen on Tisha B'Av, right, where we spend the whole day fasting. So they always told, again, I don't know if this is a story of legend, but that on Motzei Tisha B'Av of Liechtenstein, before he would go home, before he would eat anything, um, I think I once heard a version of it that said he would even, make sure there was a minyan outside of his shul that was saying Kiddush Levana, and then he would leave and go to the base medrash and sit down and learn. And someone had the nerve once to ask him, what's going on here? He said, we just had an entire day where studying Torah is not allowed to us. I need to, I can't, that's what I need. That's my sustenance is to sit and learn. And so he, before he ate, before he did anything else, he went and opened a sefer. Um, so anyway, back to our story. The second detail she picks up on is the barefootedness, right? It says that, but before the servant comes back the fourth time, this very strange detail, she had just removed her shoes. Why do we care? What's the point when, obviously that leads to her possibly in the first version stepping in the pile of dung, but why is she without her shoes? And even if she did take her shoes off, if she decides she's going out to the market, why doesn't she put her shoes back on? Right? That's a very strange thing. And so we have a second source that deals with Marta and her bare feet. From Eicha Rabbah, Masa b'Miriam bat Baitu Shakicha Yehoshua ben Gamla. So right, Marta is the Aramaic, I don't know, Greek, Roman. Marta is Miriam. So right, so here she's called Miriam bat Baitus, but it's the same character, the same woman. She was married to Yoshua ben Gamla. Umanahu HaKamelech Leo Kohen Gadol, and the king appointed him to be Kohen Gadol. Again, there was a lot of corruption in this appointment of Yeshua ben Gamla as Kohen Gadol, but nonetheless he was Kohen Gadol. Nichnasa pamachat lirot. So Marta, Miriam, wants to go and see her husband working as the Kohen Gadol. Amra ilech ve'oto kashu korei b'yom kippurim b'beit hamikdash. So she says, I'm going to go see him as he's serving, as he's doing the service on Yom Kippur in the Beit HaMikdash. Hotziu la taptiot mipatach beita ad petach Beit HaMikdash. So what did they do? They rolled out carpets for her from the opening of her home all the way to the Beit HaMikdash. We don't know how far distance that was, but the custom was, right, for the really rich people, they would roll out carpets and they wouldn't have to step on the ground. So that her feet wouldn't become irritated. And then here, this source tells us, even nonetheless, even though they rolled out the carpets, her feet still became irritated, right? And that certainly is the case in our story as well, right? So why does the Gemara make the point to tell us that she was barefoot, right? Again, is to drive home, right, how detached from reality she was. She was accustomed to having servants roll out carpets in front of her every time she left the house. She assumes that's going to happen now too. I don't need to bother putting my shoes on. It's not going to bother me. And she and so she suffers as a result. Right. So she was right. So Gila finds commentary on this. She was barefoot, shut up in her palatial home with servants coming to come and go for her. Marta is clearly unaccustomed to leaving the house and does not think to put her shoes on. She is, as Rabbi Yochanan describes her, the tender and delicate woman who would not set her foot upon the ground. Moreover, the wealthy of Jerusalem would often have carpets rolled out for them wherever they went. Marta, entirely out of touch with reality around her, probably expects carpets to be there now at the height of the Roman siege. She has no sense of the depths of devastation waiting for her outside her door. The encounter with
The shoes may have directly have to do with her wealth and nobility.
uh-huh.
I mean, we have in the 20th century a powerful woman that fancied shoes.
Right, no, so that's the opposite. Meaning, like, so you're saying that we expect fancy women to wear fancy shoes.
Yes.
In their time, the fancy women didn't wear shoes at all, right? She was
Oh,
accustomed to having carpets. She didn't need shoes. Right,
oh, well,
the encounter with the outside world proves fatal. Rather than carpets and an entourage of servants, Marta is greeted by the cold, hard ground with all the rot and filth of an infamine city. Her laying of her foot directly in the dirt is symbolic of the first unmediated contact with reality. The shock, the error, and disgust are too much for her delicate soul to bear. She dies.
There's
Yeah.
there. Marta's father's name was Boethus,
Mm-hmm.
which is Greek,
Yeah.
as Boethos. The older transcription is Boethus or
O-U-S.
OS.
Yeah.
And so looked it up real quick, and Rabbi Google informs me that Boethus is the name that the Greeks gave to one of the great pharaohs of Egypt of about uh, uh, 3000 BCE,
Mm-hmm.
a long time ago. And so it's interesting. So Miriam or Marta uh, comes from perhaps great background, but it's alien.
Yeah.
And it suggests she has connections or a family that prides itself on its ancient connections to great power, including the home of Paro Melech Mitzrayim.
Yeah.
Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu was also somebody who had connections to the home of Paro Melech Mitzrayim.
Right. Right. And he had a very different trajectory.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, so one more sort of broad contextual piece, right? So remember, before the Martha story, we read about the siege of Jerusalem and the fact that there were these wealthy men who were able and willing to sustain the city for 21 years, except that the zealots burnt down the city, right? So again, so the point that she sees in this is that it wasn't without precedent that Marta could have acted differently, right? Marta's held very much in contrast with these other wealthy individuals. And unlike them, who are willing to give everything for the survival of the Jewish people in the besieged city, she was still using her wealth to go try to find the finest flour and expect her servants to be running in front of her, laying out carpets, so she wouldn't have to touch the ground. And right, the one version of the story where she dies on the fig of Rebbe Tzadok, right? That tells us, right? Again, that's in contrast to Marta. Rebbe Tzadok understood what was happening, right? He was fasting, it said, for 40 years. He was going through this, only eating the figs. So, right, again, he was aware of the imminent disaster and undergoes severe privation to try and prevent it, while Marta, oblivious, indulges in fine cuisine. Right, so that's what we see of Marta. But right, and this is where everything kind of turns on its head, is the very end of the Marta story. What does she do?
She throws away her money.
She throws away her money and she says, okay, I finally get it, right? She has a moment. It's too late to do anything. She dies immediately afterwards, but she comes to the realization that her wealth is not going to help her, and that there's more important things in life. And so that, she does have that moment of insight. And the suggestion is that that moment is, at least literarily, what allows Rabbi Yochanan to get out of the city and make the bold request and establish a yeshiva in Yavne, which is going to perpetuate and continue Jewish life. Right, it is there is a redeeming factor to Marta at the very end, where she does come to the realization and the understanding that her wealth is pointless, and she has she has that moment of clarity. One more point in this Gemara is the Charya ben Avkulus, and we already mentioned that the use of the phrase Anvunato is very strange. His modesty is what destroyed Jerusalem. Right, so in source number 6, you have a Tosefta, which shows in a very different context, but this was the nature of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas, right? There was a machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Once you eat, your Shabbos meal, and you have what do you do with the garbage? So there's a debate: is the garbage muksa? Is it not muksa? Can you put it in the, can you move it off the table? Can you not move it off the table? It says that Zachariah ben Avkulas was paralyzed. He wouldn't rule one way or the other. He couldn't make a decision. And we come now to her conclusion of this whole story. Right? In a moment of trenchant rabbinic self-critique, we are given the true reason for the destruction, not the host's hatred, but the rabbi's humility. The choice of words is remarkable. I think, Anne, I heard you mention this, right? Throughout rabbinic literature, humility is unequivocally valorized. This is one of just 2 cases where the word is used in a negative sense. The second case is also Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas with his machlokas Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Second paragraph. For this precisely is when humility goes wrong, when it undermines our confidence, when it paralyzes, when the fear of making a mistake prevents us from doing anything, which is often the greatest mistake of all. So humble are the rabbis, so lacking in conviction, in a sense of their own authority, they dare not take a stand where one is urgently needed. Humility goes wrong when it makes good men do nothing. Okay, so that's the that she says is the overall point of this very long story and drama in 6 parts or 8 parts, however you want to divide it, of beginning with Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and culminating in Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. That is the lesson, and that, she says, is what we need to, that's why this is so foundational to Tisha B'Av, right? Is to understand that. And again, there's it feels like every year, but maybe especially this year, it's very easy to point to some of the rigidity and the lack of flexibility being exercised by various groups in the Jewish world on all sorts of issues, and that's the real tragedy. I wanted to, again, this really should be an hour-long shir in itself, but mala asot, what can we do? One more point from a literary perspective that Gila Fine makes is, right, in source number 9. I didn't even give the English translation because it would have gone on for 5 more pages. But you have the chapters 4 and chapters 5 of the Mishnah Gittin. Right? Our story from Gittin 55b to 56b is in the 5th chapter. So the context, right? The Gemara is always commenting on the Mishnah. Chapter 4 of Gittin, and I highlighted it in Hebrew, right? Has a series of takanot, of enactments, which were made because, right, different rabbinic decrees, really rabbinic compromises or rabbinic leniencies, which were made mipnei tikkun ha'olam, right? You see that at least 10, 12 times here, right? The Hitkin mipnei tikkun olam. They made this as an enactment because of tikkun olam. Um, uh, and then we have mipnei takanat hashvuyim, right? We have a takana that was made, right? You shouldn't pay an overly high ransom because we don't want for cat to redeem captives because takanat hashvuyim, we don't want to encourage our enemies to take captives that they'll exact such a high price. There's
Mhm.
one mipnei tikkun hamizbeach somewhere. Um, Yipnei takanat hashavim, right? That if you would
Mhm.
enforce the true rule in a case of someone who steals something and then wants to return it back, if you steal a beam of wood and you build a house with it, so technically you have to return the wood to the first owner, but you're going to destroy an entire house. No, you just return the value of the wood, right? That's called takanat hashavim. If we would enforce the strict rule, then no one would ever do tshuva, no one would ever repent because it would be overly burdensome. Um, and so the point she says, right, is not only do we have this story which highlights the need for flexibility and lack of rigidity, but it's situated in the Talmud in in a chapter in a extended section which is all about compromise, which is all about enacting right these takanots, these leniencies, these enactments that were made in order that a life of Torah can be actually lived and can be lived with common sense and not in a way that's overly burdensome. And so it's not only, right, yes, the powerful story of Marta and everything that surrounds it, but the the where it's found in the Talmud also highlights this point. And so that's the ultimate takeaway that she sees in this Marta story, and one of the powerful messages for us as we prepare to enter into Tisha B'av.
Mhm.
Any final questions, reactions, thoughts?
I had just one to offer that
Yeah,
the Shorish, the Havana, suggests someone who's kind of putting themselves down in a way, the verb itself. And whenever,
because it's related to ani, to poverty.
yeah,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
to lower
Yeah,
themselves in a way that is unhealthy,
yeah,
that type of thing. And but but bittul itself also means not to be thinking so much about what one wants to do, but rather a person should ask, what is it that Hashem wants? What is it that Hashem wants? And to always have the courage and no the responsibility to do that, no matter what anyone else says. And that we didn't find a whole lot of except in Rabbi Yochanan. He just said, well, let's see, what can I do here? What would Hashem want? Well, he wants the study of the Torah. That's got to stay. I
yeah,
mean, what the whole book of Devarim is about, really. Moshe realizes all these horrible things are going to happen. What's the first set of laws that he talks about? It's the judges and how to study Torah and how to adjudicate things. That system has got to stand no matter what. It's like he got the whole point of the book of Devarim in his head, and that's it.
yeah, yeah,
That that to him was God's voice to him. He didn't consult with anybody else except Hashem, and we can feel that. And in these other cases, we can't. We see people kind of backing up to get some kind of support for what they want from whatever else. It's really tough, though, and for us to judge anybody. I don't need to judge anybody else.
But I like what you were saying, Anne, in terms of like I've been thinking about like Moshe is an Ishanav, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? And Rashi says like something about like savlanut,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is patience, but it could also be in modern Hebrew, sovlanut is
Mm-hmm.
tolerance, right? And
Mm-hmm.
allowing there to be
Mm-hmm.
all these different opinions. So that's an interesting thing to put in terms of the reading of, at a certain point in time, you can't just say status quo and let's be tolerant of everyone, but you have to make a decision. But people want to be told what the right thing is to do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Moshe had that.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
Moshe had that anivut of it's not about me, it's about whatever it is, whatever orders I've been given, those are the orders I'm going to carry out. But it's the orders are there, right? Whereas
Mhm.
over here, it's like I'm waiting. If somebody gives me an order that this is what I'm supposed to do, like a batkol or a sign from God, then I'll do it. But until a decision, until I'm told otherwise, this is what we do. And so it's like trying to maintain a community that's already on its way out, like
Mhm.
you sort of
Mhm.
have to, and you have to make those decisions. It's definitely indecisiveness. I don't know, but I liked what you were saying about the like to look into the as opposed to Moshe.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll call it a night. So tomorrow the fast begins, I believe 8:28 is the fast time start. We will be davening mincha at the shul at 8:15, leading right into Marv and Eicha. I hope, and then we have on Thursday, we'll be davening Shacharis at MMAE at 7 o'clock, and starting at 3:30, we have a wonderful lineup of films, which will hopefully
It
be
really looks good.
thought-provoking and a effective way to close out the day. And Mincha at 8 o'clock on Thursday afternoon at the shul. Have an easy fast, everyone, a meaningful fast. And as I said, we'll go on a little break for the next couple weeks as I'll be in Israel and then traveling, and so we'll reconvene soon. Lila Tov.
Thank you
So,
so
thank
much,
you, Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank
Have
you.
wonderful journeys. I
Thank you.
don't get a chance to
I'll
tell you.
I'll be here in Shabbos still, so
Yeah,
still see everyone. Yeah.
good, good, good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.